You know.
I'm back. And frankly, I couldn't be better. But that's a tale for the end of the video. First, let's talk about today's story. Have you ever been to a grocery store? You've seen those Karens with that particular haircut that just, nails on chalkboard. You know the one I'm talking about. Well, imagine them as actually a D&D player, and instead of finding them at the grocery store, they're in your campaign. Every single week, over and over again, well, thankfully you don't have to, because today's OP did that for us. And they probably wish they hadn't, but hey, they did, and they provided a story, so let's roll for initiative and get right on into it. Content warning. Inappropriate public sexuality and genital mutilation. That's right, off to a good foot. Once, many moons ago, I had an extended run-in with the rarest breed of creepy player, a that girl. That girl, whom we shall refer to as Karen for the purposes of the story, was far and away the creepiest person I had ever gamed with. Karen had no understanding of social graces and odious personal habits. She rarely washed her clothes. Her feet could fumigate a room whenever she took her shoes off, which, sadly, was often. And her living space where we gamed was always covered in filth. Both she and our regular GM, her boyfriend, loved to flaunt their relationship in extremely inappropriate ways. This ranged from the mundane, like most of the plots revolving around her character, or her character mysteriously always having more XP than us, to the truly outlandish, such as Karen actually performing you-know-what on the GM under a blanket mid-session. But gods forbid you say or do anything that makes her mildly uncomfortable. Then she'll lash out at you in-game, or get her boyfriend to punish you. So, what set her off? Many things. Doing something in-game that outshined her character. Asking if she could stop with her long-winded, off-topic rants about how Bush was literally Hitler so we could actually play the game. Or if she found out you interacted in any way with character ships she didn't like in online forums, etc. She ticked just about every box for what might be called a Tumblrina. But to give you an idea of how long ago this was, Tumblr didn't exist yet. Which brings me to the actual story. We decided to take a break from our current World of Darkness campaign. Are you really surprised that Karen was obsessed with Vampire the Masquerade? To play something a little different. This new campaign was pitched to me as a lighthearted fantasy spoof campaign. We would be using the generic version of the Tri-Stat system from Guardians of Order, most famous for its use in Big Eyes Small Mouth, with Karen as the GM. Now, by this point, I was getting pretty fed up with Karen's behavior. But the campaign pitch seemed like fun, so I decided to deal with it. We already had a sarcastic elf mage played by Karen's boyfriend, and a stereotypical JRPG protagonist. So, to round out our crew, I set out to make a stereotypical fighter, a boorish, ale-swilling lout with the social graces of a wild boar, and then make him the butt of the jokes. It worked! For the most part. Karen's boyfriend and our other players thought my axe-wielding fighter was a scream as I interrupted the JRPG's protagonist's overwrought monologue by belching, or charged into fights and got my butt handed to me. Hello, terrible rolls. But you know who didn't think it was funny? Karen. Now, up until this point, the campaign had been lighthearted with minimal gore. I bring this up because of what happened next. Karen had an NPC who had shown up once before, a pirate queen who shared a personality, name, and appearance with Karen's pet character from Vampire the Masquerade and Deadlands. I knew a Mary Sue when I saw one, but I decided to play along. Our party arrived in a rather unusual village, one seemingly inhabited entirely by young, attractive women. I also know a trap when I see one, but playing in character, I decided to spring it anyways, on purpose, and see what happens. Big mistake. Karen described how my character was knocked out with a blackjack without any rolls. A little odd, but okay. Then Karen got an increasingly wicked smile on her face, as she describes my character waking up to find himself tied and hanging upside down. Okay. Karen's wicked grin gets even wider as she proceeds to describe in graphic detail how her Pirate Queen NPC draws a dagger and castrates my character. A stunned silence falls over the room, punctuated by awkward laughter from Karen's boyfriend. Excuse me? I ask. She cuts your dick off and tosses it to the ground. The other women then eat it in front of you. I will admit, I was rather perturbed by this sudden right turn from goofy Looney Tunes slapstick into Saw-esque horror. Not to mention that there is a certain degree of intensely personal violation when a character you identify with suffers such an extreme and cruel form of mutilation. I expressed my displeasure to Karen, who responded, "You should have known I messed up in the head." The session ended, and I packed my things. I was wondering if I'm going to keep playing with this group when my question was answered for me later that night in the form of a text message from Karen's boyfriend, again our main GM, that the game was cancelled, shortly followed by texts from the other players asking if I wanted to GM again. There it is, the story of how the creepiest player I've ever gamed with was a woman, how she inflicted genital mutilation on my character, and ended her group. If you've ever wondered what the male equivalent to all those creepy GM/player violated my character stories was, now you know. I certainly wish that I didn't. End post. Okay. Normally, I try to aim for some sort of redemption for the player, but just with the description of what happened before this particular set of circumstances occurred, I would have noped out of there. Like, frankly, I would have left, and I would have texted the other players, hey, are you guys okay with this? Because chances are, they're not. And clearly, that was the case by what happened at the very end. Yeah, I would have nope.jpg'd all the way out of there really early on, especially with what happened under the blanket that was mentioned very early into the story. I can't imagine playing long-term with anyone like this, and hopefully none of you guys are either. Or if you have, or currently are, you know to get out of there. Anyhow, let's have a quick channel update, because last I checked, I put out a video about 3.5 months ago and nothing since. So clearly some stuff has happened behind the scenes. Namely, I just had a really busy year at my main job and didn't have time to put out videos, unfortunately. But I'm back, and I've got a pretty cool new video style, at least I think so. Now, speaking of the new video style, this is a little bit of a departure from what I've done in the past, being that it is entirely dynamic. So I'm calling this my Inn, and the players there are patrons, or right now patrons plus other D&D YouTubers. So if you want to actually get into the Inn, join my Patreon. And what's unique about this is the character you get, the exact model, will be based off of your name. So every time you appear in the Inn, which later on when we get more patrons may not be every episode, but will happen very frequently, you'll have the same exact model until you change your name on Patreon. If you've ever played Minecraft, it's the same idea as a map seed, so everyone's names are a seed for their individual characters. There's currently about 30 varieties that you can get for player characters, and I'm looking to expand that in the future with color variations and equipment. So eventually, your character will be statistically 100% all you and no one else will be the same. Not there yet, but pretty soon. And also what's not in the video just yet is the higher tiers. So right now we have Kuatoa, Mimic, Troll, and Baylor. The higher your tier, the more effects are going to occur for your name when it shows up. So right now everyone's just a static, floats in with a white name, might get bigger, might shake in the future with depending on your tier, or it might even be like a little rainbowy effect. Haven't really worked it out yet, but I figured my Patreon right now is just there as a thank you. There's no actual benefits to it, and I thought tagging Patreon supporter names at the end of the video wasn't really cool. So I came up with this method, which is going to be a much more engaging way to display everyone's characters. And again, if you don't like your character, how they're showing up, just change your name. You can make it anything on Patreon, or add an extra space or something just to differentiate it a little bit and change your seed. And because I did a terrible job explaining this, if you have more questions, feel free to head over to the Discord, also in the description, and I'll try to answer any questions that crop up there about it as well. Anyhow, that's it for today's story. As always, if you liked it, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button just to help out with the YouTube algorithm. Now, while you wait for my future videos, and I do intend to get better about these instead of having 3-month gaps, here are a few related videos that you can watch in the meantime.